Hey folks, welcome to the second part of the episode's focus on my journey through active recovery, and I'm very honored to bring you the story of my daughter, Lucy. This is the Chapter 3 Stigma podcast. This podcast was created to be there for any individual who feels like they are at a low point in life and are confused, seemingly alone, and helpless in their situation. I am a recovering alcoholic, and I felt this way too, until I sat across the table from another addict who shared his story and made me realize that I was not alone in my struggles. My life was saved by this realization, and I hope to help anyone struggling by sharing my story to show you that you are not alone and that life can contain unbelievable riches and meaning. Welcome. I am glad you are here. Again, this concept, this idea of day 90 for me stood out in a really big way. And leading up to my 90 days of time in active recovery, I actually found myself questioning when it was going to get hard. And God just had to be rolling on the floor laughing at that. Because my 90 days was August 12th, my son's second birthday. And August 8th, we went in for Alyssa's routine 16-week checkup on our baby. At this point, we didn't know the gender. Everything seemed to be kind of happening similar to how it happened for our son. And our son was a completely healthy pregnancy, and he was a very, very healthy infant. But August 8th, I believe it was a Tuesday, we had an appointment for your 16-week.
Yeah, I'll tell how this went down. So we went to, it was a morning appointment, went into the doctor. We had seen this, I was seeing the same doctor that I had seen with our son, Grant. And we had a good rapport with him. Come back and going back into our room, we're joking around, and he chooses to do a quick ultrasound check at the 16-week appointment. I remember having it with our son too, and so it wasn't anything unique to me. I personally think our doctor really just likes to know the gender of the baby, even if the parents don't want to know. So,
and we were not going to find out the gender.
And so that was our plan in that scenario. And so we get baby up on the monitor, and we're chatting, and suddenly he says, kind of with a softness coming into his voice, "Now remind me, did you guys do genetic testing with this one?"
Mm-hmm.
And we were just like, "Nope, we didn't. We didn't with our son, so we chose not to again." And he says, "Okay, I want you to close your eyes for a minute because I'm going to look at the gender really quick." And again, kind of getting solemn, and my heart started to race. I don't know how you were doing in that moment.
Yeah.
But he finishes up the ultrasound, and he says to us, "I'm really glad I looked at your baby today because there is something very unique about the anatomy." And he says there's a large growth on the back of the baby's neck. It's called a cystic hygroma. And I don't have any way of telling you more about this without also revealing that the gender is a girl. And what I'm seeing is oftentimes what is called, when they're linked together, it's a genetic syndrome that can be occurring. And so I want to get you moving along to a specialist because you need to have some further testing done.
Yeah. And you and him had a lot deeper and further conversation than I recall, because my experience of that check-in and that quick ultrasound was, first I was sitting over in the corner of the room. They have this literal just
Teeny tiny bench.
Yeah, this tiny bench that I'm sitting in, like tucked behind the computer system. And so I remember, and I might be remembering this wrong, but I remember the language that the doctor used was, "I'm seeing something concerning," or there was something about a concern being brought up.
Yeah.
But as soon as that word got spoken, I just kind of dropped into my head. And it was like one of those experiences where conversation is happening around you and it's kind of like muted, and I'm aware that you two were talking, and like I looked at you at one point and I could just see like concern and like a level of gravity and seriousness on your face.
Well, when the doctor is apologizing to you for what what he's seeing and what he's having to tell you, like that was where I think it hit both of us. Like, well, oh no, we've got a big road ahead of us.
And what hit me was not even what he was saying, but it was the thought progression that went through my head. And as soon as he started expressing concern and getting into the details of like the potential complications, my first thought was, this is what you deserve, Kyle. This is God punishing you for 12 years of alcoholism. This is God punishing you for 2.5 years of lying to your family, to your wife. And just as quickly as that thought popped up into my head, there was like this resounding shift. I don't even know how to describe it, but I almost felt myself say out loud, no, that's not right. And what I thought after that was, God always knew that this little girl was part of our story, that she was going to come into our life and that it was going to be a struggle. And God's way of preparing you for what was to come was to give you your battle with alcoholism and to give you 28 days, more than 28 days of intense time of self-reflection and self-improvement so that you will be ready for this. So we left the doctor that day, and there's a lot of detail to go into here, but I think like from a high level, it was basically constant doctor appointments. It was one specific time, like we had 10 minutes in the doctor's office one time where we thought we were losing our girl, and we wound up naming her that day. You can pick up here if you want.
I will.
Basically there were just always more discoveries.
Yeah.
Every doctor's appointment we did,
and a lot of it was unknowns too.
It was almost entirely unknowns for like 8 weeks.
Yeah. There was genetic testing involved that we did end up doing, and there were
complications from that.
And ultimately, all they can do is look at things through ultrasound. And when we're talking about vital organs that potentially are either misformed or are not functioning properly, they told it to us in our appointments, like, we're looking at this with the wrong tools. Like, we need to look at things,
but it's all they had
with an MRI or a CT scan, but you can't do those things while the baby has not been born. So there's just lots of like moments where we were moving forward with things, or we would get information, but what is like, we were getting all the puzzle pieces on the outside, but we weren't really like, being
fitting
able to fill in the full picture
at all. Yeah. And we had members of our care team who were preparing us for the fact that, like, based on what they're seeing, infants aren't born with this. They generally have, this condition generally overstresses their systems and their heart fails. And so we were prepared basically every time we went into the doctors, we would say a prayer together and just say, selfishly, we hope to hear a heartbeat, but just prepare us for whatever is to come. And like our little girl just, she kept kicking, and
Yeah,
she
she's
kept,
very, very strong.
she was so strong.
And at this point, like Kyle had started to allude to, we had a name for her. Her name was Lucy. We started using her name. And this isn't something we were able to do with our son because we did not know if he was going to be a boy or a girl and what his name was going to be and all those things. And so we were doing what we could, grasping at what we could to make a connection to our daughter. And I mean, through all this, to bring it back around to, Kyle's recovery, like I didn't know how much of this information, at what point is this information going to become too much for him?
Mm-hmm.
And, like we were very hyper vigilant on like how Kyle was doing through all of this. And he, continued to show that he was going to be strong through this. And that doesn't mean it wasn't hard for you. But it was definitely a big concern with it all. How's Kyle's emotions? And
we were both dealing with the heaviness, and we
started grieving what we expected of this pregnancy the moment we heard that something unique was going on.
Yeah. So after a number of weeks of continued doctor visits, genetic tests, we kind of get settled in on, okay, our little girl, Lucy, she needs a heart surgery. She has many other complications, but she has a known heart defect and it requires surgery. And they were not
fast,
like pediatric.
Within a week of
or
birth
so
was the plan.
And so we knew Boise did not have the surgical capabilities like at all. Actually, the entire state didn't. So we started shopping around the nation and looking for the best pediatric cardiovascular like surgical center we could find. And it just so happens that one of the top in the nation was 25 minutes from where I grew up, where my parents currently lived. And so we got set to move back to Minnesota to be with family and to welcome our little girl into this world and continue her fight.
Yeah, we would move mountains for this baby. I mean, I think most people feel that way about their child, and we're no different.
And it really, like, because we were going to so many appointments and because it was like we were getting constant like new discoveries and things like that, I don't think the gravity of the situation really hit us until we got to Minnesota. No. And we got with a care team that was going to like be there for Lucy's delivery and aftercare, and those were our most trusted.
Throughout the whole thing, we trusted all of the medical professionals, but those were the ones that we grew the closest bonds to.
Yeah.
And this, Kyle says, like, we didn't understand the gravity, and this was despite having palliative care meetings in Boise, and then we in Minnesota had a secondary palliative care meeting, and we had to make some very difficult decisions that most parents don't expect to be making when they're expecting. You're expecting that you're going to have a child that's eventually coming home with you, and we did not know what that path was going to look like for us.
Yep. So we got to Minnesota in early to mid November, met extensively with our care team. Really the best way it was framed to us was from Alyssa's doctor, and she said, "You have a critically ill but stable child right now. As soon as she is born and as soon as she that umbilical cord is cut, she's just critically ill." And so again, just the weight was really, really bearing down on us, but we were maintaining faith. We were maintaining our relationship, and one of us would be having an okay day and the other one could be struggling, and we were there for each other as best as we could. And of course it helped immensely to have family there, but kind of hit a state where we were doing doctor visits and waiting
to put the plan into play.
Yep.
We I would say during that time, especially, like, I was in a pregnancy fog in some ways, and also like part of the complications with all of this was that I was in a significant amount of pain.
Yeah, it was very hard on you.
Just based on Lucy's complications and what that all meant. We don't need to get into the details of that, but what I mean to say by it all is Kyle was a huge advocate during that time, and he was exactly what I needed in those moments to get the information that wasn't getting into my head, or to keep the information straight that I couldn't keep straight at those times. And
yeah, it was a lot.
Yeah. And you were an advocate for me for taking care of myself too. I had a couple of procedures that were done with the pregnancy, and we don't know this for certain, but the second one might have progressed our timeline a little bit, and I ended up having my water break on December 14th.
In the early mornings.
That was several weeks prior.
Lucy's due date was January 26th. And so, yeah, multiple, what was it, 33 weeks would have been. So it was a pretty surreal drive-in. We called an ambulance, and Alyssa was in the back, and they did permit me to drive along. And so I was up front, and you were having a conversation with the EMS in the back, but I'm not sure what was going through your head. For me, it was just this idea that, my God, our daughter is going to be born today, and we are going to lose her today because we knew that it was too early. I'm curious to know what was going through your mind on the drive into the hospital.
On the drive into the hospital, I had an incredible amount of adrenaline hitting me.
That's right.
And it was a really long ride because we were about 25 minutes away from the hospital that we had to deliver at. It was where we were staying. So we had a very long drive, and me being, I don't know, Midwestern, would you call it? I was just like having small talk with the people. I honestly like could not tell you.
Yeah.
I was probably trying to keep my mind off of like what the reality of the situation was. Because we had just, these plans that we had laid out were plans that were not, in my mind, I was trying to manifest. These plans were not supposed to be happening until at very least end of December. And here we are beginning middle of December and they're happening.
Yeah. Yeah. And the
scared.
driver, like, I was not having those conversations. The only thing that I talked to the driver about was, please just go to Abbott, which was the hospital we had to go to. And I said it like 3 or 4 times on the drive because we had to pass like 2 or 3 other like very good hospitals and hospitals that they would have brought us to. But Lucy
they ultimately would have transferred us to the others. So it was like, just take us to the right one.
Yeah, and Lucy had such a specialized need that we had to go to this hospital. So the other thing that I did think about on the drive in was December 14th was 7 months in recovery for me. And it was a little bit surreal because it's like, gosh, 7 months isn't that long, but to be faced with the impending birth and loss of your daughter, I was there.
Well, yeah.
I was the person I needed to be. And it had only taken 7 months. Like,
there's a reason they say like no new things within a year of making a significant life change like this. And here you were, having lots of new things, life and death potentially, that you were having to face.
So then we got to the hospital. Alyssa got her last breath of fresh air for quite some time as they transferred her in or carried her in. But
he means it was the last time I was outside for a while.
Not
that I had to use a ventilator or anything.
No. Yeah, good point. But no, we found out within like a couple hours of being in there that the goal was to keep you pregnant for a few more weeks.
I was shocked by that.
Yeah.
I know you were too.
Yeah, I had no idea that this was like even a thing because your water broke in very much like a dramatic and movie like scenario or
Again, in detail, we probably don't need to
go into that, but there's a story there. But it's like, there's no way this baby's not born today. And so we settled into antepartum, and we got like a pretty nice big group.
We should describe, because I think it was my mom who told me she had to like Google what antepartum was after we entered it. And essentially it's where they send women who are pregnant, who need to be under close observation in a, in a clinical state. So essentially like some people will be in there and they'll leave the hospital before their baby is born. But in our scenario,
we were not leaving.
You're staying here till this baby is born, because
and
levels could be low in terms of like keeping them alive.
Yep. And Lucy was just so high risk and had so many complications. And so we focused our shift to like being together 100% of the time. I stopped working at that point, and we couldn't leave that wing of the hospital. Because
Kyle could technically,
I could,
but I told him that he was in hospital jail with me. If I was going to be there, I needed him there.
I did have to show you how serious I was about my my whole like movement thing. Like, I had my family bring a small kettlebell into the hospital so that I could keep working out and keep active. And we settled in. We figured it'll be a few more weeks, but Lucy had her own plans, and in the very early morning of December 20th, Alyssa woke. You never went to sleep that night, really, but you woke me up on the couch, and what I woke up to was my wife with her hands on her hips with an intense grimace of pain on her face. And it was just like, oh my gosh. And so the nurse got called in, and nurse walks in, takes a look at Alyssa again, like basically just reads her face and goes, you know what, I'm going to step out. We're going to get the on-call doctor here. And things progressed and moved from there. And Lucy, the plan was always that Lucy was going to be born in the operating room, whether it no matter what she was going to be born. Yeah, because she was going to be born in the operating room. She had to be transported immediately. She had to be stabilized and transported to the NICU immediately. And so she was born, and the NICU team was literally in the next door, and Lucy got passed over to them, and it took about 30 minutes for them to stabilize her, get her oxygen levels up, get some fluid drained from her lungs, and then Lucy and I and the team walked down to the NICU from that like OR space, and Alyssa was kept in the in her, I guess, wing of the hospital, and you were reunited with our parents there, right?
Yeah. I think it should also be noted that during this delivery, we did not know, as we mentioned before. She was critically ill.
Yeah.
Lucy was, and so would she survive delivery was a big question. Could she be stabilized?
Right.
Once she was born.
Just more unknowns, which was kind of the theme.
And our plan always was, as soon as she's delivered, she's taken over by the NICU team, and Kyle's at her side.
Yep.
As much as he can be from there.
Yep. Yeah, and so witnessing Lucy get stabilized in the actual NICU was an experience I'll never forget. And the interesting thing about that was I was sitting outside of the room, and I was tired. I was emotional. I was, it was a little bit like an out-of-body experience, but I found myself watching this team work on my daughter, work on behalf of my daughter, and I just found an incredible amount of gratitude. And just watching them do these extremely complicated procedures and processes, and I found myself thinking like, God, isn't it a miracle like we figured that out? and we have this ability to stabilize this type of child. And we've gone back and forth on this. I think it was like 2 hours that I was in the NICU with Lucy before I came back to your hospital room and got together with our parents and just, obviously embraced in a big way and kind of got, I don't know how else to say it, like got going with our day. And the reason I say that is like, we sort of just fell into a routine then in the hospital and the NICU. Alyssa, you had a couple days stay in the hospital for your recovery, and I was splitting time between your space and Lucy's space in the NICU, and you were coming down to the NICU, but you had your check-ins to do with your care team.
And I mean, honestly, you were such a huge advocate for Lucy. Being in that recovery space that I was in, I did not have the mental capacity on top of it to like get on board with everything that was going on with her in terms of like having an understanding of what was hooked up to her, what kind of treatments were being provided to her. And Kyle really took the reins on that. And you had that down. And every time I asked, I'm sure I asked you the same question several times. What are we trying to see here? Like, where do we want these numbers to go? Things like that. And you knew the answers. And I mean, there was times where you would be in her room and give me a phone call and say, hey, I think Lucy really needs her mom right now. Can you come down here? So you just had a really good understanding and intuition as to what our daughter needed. And I think that again speaks to you were exactly the kind of man that you needed to be in those moments. And a big part of that was because you had gone through the process of getting the help that you needed and continuing with your recovery after rehab.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was a special aspect of it when you realized that, and this applies to you as well, but like despite or because of all the monitors and let me back up. Our daughter had been looked at and poked and prodded so much and like so many images of her, and yet what I was discovering in that time in the NICU was nobody knew her like you and I knew her.
Yeah.
And that was a pretty incredible experience to have, where it's like, even though she was struggling and she was very sick and not able to, like, I guess formally tell us things, like Lucy never cried, but we could still tell, we could sense things with her. And so we fell into a routine. We were lucky enough that we got into the Ronald McDonald House at the hospital, and we were a 2-minute walk from our bedside to Lucy's in the NICU. And we would walk in each morning, like I can still sense and smell like the hand sanitizer that we put on, and we would walk in and we would say, morning, Lucy. We would go and give her a kiss on the forehead, and
yeah, she still had that like new baby smell. Yeah. And it was, especially for a new mom, I can't speak to a new dad, but it's just like this intoxicating baby smell that you want to be around all the time. And
yeah,
and and all we could do those very first few days was touch her hands, put our hands on her head. She had a beautiful head of red hair. It was a little bit.
So we have 2 redheaded children.
Yeah, which
neither
for those you don't know, neither one of us are redheads, so it's something unique about our family. But we would just touch her hand, hold her hand, watch her arms make very subtle little movements when she wasn't overly sedated, and really have those newborn moments that you want with your baby, but from, I don't know, not an arm's length away, but like a little ways away. It was just different.
Well, and even despite, because Lucy was in what they called a high-tech room, and because of the severity of her case, like she was the sickest baby in the NICU the entire time she was there. Despite the like sterile environment that you get in the hospital. In a weird way, there was something comforting about her room.
Yeah.
And
it's because it was all warm and
it was warm. Yeah. And
cozy. Trying to keep baby warm
like
and all those
like
things.
the nurses really made it special. The whole care team and, our family was able to be there. And so it really
like our
was.
nephew made signs
Our
for
nephew,
her
yeah, they made
to like hang on her door. And it just felt like her little home.
Yep. And so one of the things that we realized with, as the days were going on, we realized it the first day, but this has been such a shift in the way I think about relationships and go through life now. But every single time we said goodbye to Lucy, we had to be satisfied. And so really having this hyper focus into not departing without, feeling like you expressed your love and admiration for, in this case, our daughter, but it's really extended to other individuals in our life, is probably like one of the greatest things that Lucy taught me. And it was, it was hard leaving her every night, and we were chomping at the bit every morning to get back to her room.
Well, it's an odd concept to leave her too with, every time we would leave, like, let's say we would go to eat dinner. Like, okay, well, we'll be back in about 2 hours. It's like,
yeah, and the nurse
was like, I'll be here. This is my job.
We're not gonna leave.
We're not leaving her. And so that was kind of, just like this weird thing you
Yeah.
deal with the NICU in general. But yeah, just having that satisfaction. And I do think one of the things that allowed us to connect with her was the nurses had advocated that we were able to hold her.
Yeah.
And so each of us, and it was a big ordeal to be able to hold such a critically
ill
ill
just to
child.
get Lucy into our arms.
And we each got to hold her for 3 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And that alone, that like skin to skin touch and, just being that close to our baby again was more than, it was the best moments one of the best moments of our lives.
Yeah. The word I use to describe it is complete.
Yeah.
Like as soon as I held her, it was just like, oh wow, this feels completely
so right.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. And so on December 27th, Alyssa and I had stepped out for dinner and actually a chat with family who came to see us just down in the hospital lobby. And we went back into Lucy's room, and it was almost like she was waiting for us to get back. And she gave us some very clear signs that her time on Earth was coming to a close. So we
had always said, or the way we made decisions throughout that week was that Lucy was going to lead this. She's going to tell us what she needs. She is going to tell us if and when her time has come.
Yep.
And there's not going to be a question for us. We're never going to have to make the life or death decision ourselves. She was going to be the one to drive that.
Yeah. And so, the care team did what they could do, but they wound up stabilizing Lucy enough. And, her like numbers, or her, I guess like systems vitals. Thank you. Weren't bouncing back to where they had been. And so it was like, we consulted with the doctor, and it was agreed upon that, her fight was over, and we were incredibly able to get every single one of our immediate family members there. Just for one last opportunity to
hold her hand, be with her for a moment, and just express their love for her once more. Especially for our siblings, that was important, I would say, because they'd only seen her one time. Grandparents had seen her a few times. But we just had so much limitations, not placed on us, but just realistic limitations of what we could,
Yeah,
who we
it
could
was-
have in the room,
Right.
how often, so that she was still able to try to recover when
Yeah,
she
she
could.
had
So
she had a recovery journey of her own.
yeah.
But yeah, then Grant was able to be there to say goodbye to his sister, and yeah, that evening Lucy
We essentially had everyone in another room in the NICU, and Kyle and I were able to be with her for her last breaths
Yep.
and just surround her with our love. And she was no
Got
longer
to-
connected to
Yeah, she
all of
was
the cords and monitors and
stripped
everything.
of all of
and
that.
just, given some pain relief and allowed her to.
Pass. And it was oddly and incredibly peaceful.
Yeah.
The way it occurred, and again, just the care team that was there with us was so unbelievable, and like we'll never forget them, and
Yeah.
the fact that our family was able to be there with us, and
It meant a lot. I mean, it's not an experience we would have had we been in Idaho
no,
with our families
or
halfway
anywhere
across
else
country. Yeah.
to pursue her care. So we really felt blessed and incredibly lucky, and
Yeah, I'll go back to this peace part that you brought up there, and it's a sense of peace that her suffering was over. Her difficulties
Yeah.
had come to a close.
there are
and
so many unknowns throughout her story.
yeah, and it gave us it finally we knew what was next.
Yep.
And it was her time. And I mean, it is so hard to see your own flesh and blood struggling the way that we could see, and just like, and not from the sense that like she looked like she was in pain or struggling, but she was, hooked up to so many resources that you
Right.
knew that, like her body wasn't able to or capable of doing all these functions on their own. And there were so many what ifs along the way, and it just it felt like again that piece of closure in her story, no matter how difficult it was.
Yep. Yeah, and just I mean, I am and I have been so honored to have gone through this journey and this life, and this, I guess, creation of this incredible human being in Lucy with you, Alyssa, and to just have witnessed us be exactly who we needed to be throughout all of this. It does not mean we were strong and that we behaved well even in every moment and with every step along the way, but we maintained our faith. We maintained I maintained my ability to stay on the path of recovery, and quite honestly, this strengthened it more than anything, because the incredible thing through all of this that I realized, I never once felt a bit of anger towards the world, a bit of anger towards God. I never questioned, why me? Why are you punishing me? It was just this realization that this is all part of a plan, and God gave us this gift of this little girl, and her strength and her life is incredible, and I just feel honored to be a part of it. And I'm just...
Do you feel like it's made you stronger?
In what aspect?
So like rehab removed the vice from being the center of your life and gave you the strength you needed to receive the information that we did in August. Do you feel like this next hit, I guess, of us having to go through this experience made you even stronger? It's like when you break down a muscle and you rebuild it by, continuing to work out and making things stronger. Like, do you feel like this has made you even stronger?
Well, what it's made me realize is actually where I want to go with this podcast next. And that's about what I see as the pillars of not only recovery, but of well-being and of a meaningful life. And one of those pillars is spiritual fitness. And that was something that when I was struggling with alcoholism, I had none of. I was not spiritually fit. And the interesting thing about the pillars, and just give y'all a bit of a preview, the pillars are physical, emotional, and spiritual fitness. And the interesting thing as it pertains to recovery and addiction is you relapse across all three of those pillars. And so you can have a spiritual relapse. And for me, what that means is like you start lashing out at God. You start wondering why. You start getting angry. You start getting to the point that I got to where I would be saying, it doesn't matter. Nothing matters. That's a spiritual relapse. And that spiritual relapse occurs sometimes well before, but the spiritual relapse always occurs before the physical relapse. And the physical relapse is when your drug of choice enters your system. And so what I have realized and what I have maintained is that I'm hurt. I was suffering immensely during Lucy's life and all the struggles that we faced, but I was never relapsing spiritually. I always kept and had and continue to have faith. And that is what maintains me, and that is what keeps me on the path. Yes, I'm hurt. I'm obviously emotional, and there's a lot to this story that I am still working on being able to look at without being overwhelmed by emotion. And that time will come, but it's still heavy. But I'm not the only one that has to bear this load. Like there's a saying, it's like, well, God doesn't give you any problems that you can't handle. And I always struggled with that when I was fighting alcoholism, because it's like, I'm clearly not handling this well. And I heard a rephrase of it while I was in rehab, and I stick to it, and I always come back to it. And it's, God doesn't give you problems that God can't handle. And so it has given me a new sense of strength and ability, knowing that I'm not alone with it, and that I can still maintain myself on this road in life of recovery despite periods of intense and immense suffering. Mm-hmm. And just I don't know the right word to use here, but just the honor of being the man that I needed to be at every single moment in Lucy's life is like that. I have this weird experience. Like, I lived out my life purpose. Like, everything else for me right now is a cherry on top. I genuinely feel that my purpose in life was to be a father to Lucy in the hospital, and to be a father to Grant, and to be your husband in that experience, in that moment. And I lived that out in the very best way that I possibly could. And now everything else is just like this incredible bonus almost. Like, I don't know how else to say that.
Well, I mean, what a way to live the rest of your life, right?
Exactly.
From a positive light. You
fulfilled
your purpose.
And I believe that Lucy's story shows like what power, what abilities recovery brings. And again, a lot of this I'm starting to realize is not just for the addict. It's for anyone looking, to better their state and to better their overall like life satisfaction and well-being. It's like, I think the greatest measure of life is how well you bear these moments of suffering. And not in my wildest dreams would I have ever been able to maintain my spiritual like fitness and just like no way in hell was I going to stay sober through this before going into rehab. Like I've told people, it's a little bit scary, but luckily it's not a reality. We're living. You and Grant would have been losing 2 family members through this, either via death or divorce. But I was definitely headed down the road of death. Had I not entered rehab and gotten on the road of recovery when I did.
I know. It was such a blessing to have you be the person that you were through all of it, because I needed it. I mean, I consider myself decently strong throughout everything we've been through over the years, but
I have a pile of Kleenex next to me, and
I have none.
You have none.
No, I'm the really
emotional one in this.
I'm
this
so well.
Yes.
I'm just so proud of everything. Like honestly, like that's where this stems from, and like that's what I mean. Like of Lucy's story, of your story. I'm just so proud of it all, and so I'm emotional about it. But like for me, I mean, yes, you found your purpose, but for me, like I found my pride in my family members, and that's huge. And this does not discount our son, who we haven't brought up, but he's pretty great too. So we do like him. But so kind of a little anecdotal piece to it all. You were the man that you needed to be for Lucy. You were the man that I needed you to be in that delivery room too. Like with our son, there were some critiques I could have in terms of your your spot as my companion in delivery, but for Lucy, saying, you did everything exactly what I needed you to do. Like, I mean, this is just in terms of like you having to count out my contractions and things like that. Like it was, I mean, you were just amazing with this second round, and I think you've just really come into your own, and like your priority number one is you and your recovery, but like as a result of that, it's your family.
It allows me to be there for you guys. Yeah. And to close, I want to read one of my favorite excerpts from the big book, the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and it's called The Promise, because I think it's so applicable in this case. So, quote, "If we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we are halfway through. We are going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity, and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook on life will change. Fear of people and economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves." So, in closing, this podcast, this episode, this entire project is dedicated to Lucy and the lessons and the gift of life that she has given to me, that she has given to us as a family. And Lucy, we love you more than anything. We will never forget you. That's all I've got.
If you enjoyed this podcast, share it with others or give us a rating on your channel of choice. My hope is that my story can help others in their struggles with addiction or any other aspects of life that they feel could be bettered. You can follow us on social media at Chapter 3 Stigma on Instagram and YouTube. I cannot solve your problems for you, but I can listen. If you want to reach out with a message through one of those channels, I will respond and let you know that you are not alone. All the best, you are loved, and life is worth every struggle and bit of suffering you have to endure. Until next time.